generally about Git, rebase, and all those things. Does anybody have any kind of follow-up questions to the things that we talked about last time? Any flows that you faced issues in, commands, pretty much anything under the sun, because Git is going to be, like I mentioned, super critical. So, you're not comfortable using Git, it'll always, bite you in the ass down the lane every day, pretty much. So, any questions on Git, or are we all good? Anyone? It doesn't look like there are any questions coming. Pull request and merge. Can you explain? Ravi, did you watch the study material? Because that specific topic regarding pull request and merge is something that I've covered at length because it's a very long topic. Have you already watched the study material? Is there anything specific that you didn't understand within the concept? If not, then I'll encourage you to first go back to the study material.
Yeah, just I didn't understand, sir, some concept.
Which one? What
Uh,
specific?
this pull request and merge.
But like that's like the full topic. It's like a full chapter within a book. So
I did, but a little bit not understand, sir.
okay, but
Some
anything specific within pull request? What is a pull request basically, and what is merge?
uh,
Like, did you understand that part? Did you not understand the differences? What exactly is what I'm trying to understand?
yes, sir.
No, which one? I'm asking you.
Uh, both, sir, pull request and merge. I didn't understand why do we do that.
Why do we do pull request and merge?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you understand what a pull request is?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you check out the study material from the
uh,
Git topic?
yeah, yeah, yes, sir. I check it, but I didn't understand, sir.
Okay, I think this might take a very long time, but we'll have to take it offline. So try to dive into it once again tonight, and let me know tomorrow morning in case you still are facing some issues. And let's try to nail the question down to more specific question as to, okay, within pull request, I'm not able to understand either the purpose of the pull request, or I'm not able to understand how to do it actually, or I'm not able to even understand the concept of a pull request. What exactly, which piece we are getting stuck in. So first go back to the study material and then identify which piece, and then just send me a message tomorrow morning if you're still not clear on which piece exactly it is. Okay.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Okay, cool. Cool guys. So anything else? uh, okay, so hopefully I'm assuming everybody was able to uh, nail down the git working wala flow. All right, I can see there are a bunch of submissions here, and people have started checking out the animation pieces as well. Okay, okay, cool. So let me quickly just cover for a minute here what this whole project is about, the 2D platformer project, and what we are trying to achieve here. Okay, so for this whole project, our goal is to dive into building our first 2D game. Okay, now for us to build projects, there are two ways you can go about building them, right? You can focus heavily on the technical aspects to build some fancy features, or you can try to build a full-fledged project that looks really polished but doesn't have anything technically very complex things, right? It can be simple things that you have put together, and at the end of the day, it's a working game, and you have the game which is, something that you can either show to your friends or future, engineering managers, etc. as well, right? So for this project, the focus would be that in the first half, we start to learn a lot more fundamental concepts of Unity and nail down the technical aspects, right? When to use what, how to essentially set up our projects and continue working with Git, right? So those will be the key aspects that we'll be focusing on. And then once we move into the last module, right, of this particular project, that's where we'll focus heavily on polishing it. Okay, till we go into the last, segment, you do not need to worry about making it very beautiful. or making it very polished. Okay, till that time, all your focus and effort will go into making sure that it does technically the right kind of jobs. You're writing clean code, it follows all the design guidelines, it follows all the coding principles such as single responsibility and things like that that we have already touched on in our C++ module, right? So a lot of the focus will remain towards the coding aspect. Okay, as long as the visual aspect you are able to nail down even half, decent, right? That should be good enough. Okay, do not try to go to an extreme that I'm going to make it look sexy as hell from day one, right? That's not the goal here. The goal is to learn the technical details and master the shit out of them first before we focus on polishing it. Okay, I hope that is absolutely loud and clear, because if you get stuck in polishing stuff now, you'll waste a lot of time. Okay, so I intentionally want to make sure that that is something that you are good with. Okay, any doubts in that aspect, right? Then just ask now if anything is not clear. Okay. Okay, so for this game specifically, we'll be focusing on the 2D project. And as you might have already started to go through the study material, you have gotten a basic overview of what we are doing. So the 2D project will focus on, a Mario kind of a style game where all we are doing is building levels, getting a character, a 2D character to animate, make the character jump around based on our, our keyboard input, and implement multiple levels, implement unlocking of levels and things like that as well, right? So we'll look at a lot of those things as to how are we going to structure our data so that you're going to implement 3 levels, but then I can turn it into 100 levels as well, right? Just by changing data, right? So those are the kind of things that we'll be focusing on. So a lot of the focus till the very last module that touches specifically on polish will be heavily towards purely your this thing, technical details, making sure that we nail down how to implement things, how to write clean code and things like that. Okay, so try to remain focused on the technical aspects and not worry too much, at least early on, with your polishing aspects, right? If the jump animation, for example, like in the second part, you'll see, you'll be starting setting up animations, etc., right? So if the jump animation doesn't look absolutely spot on and crisp, then that's okay for now. As long as it's doing a jump, you're able to make all the technical details work. You can tweak and the animation, etc., and make it polished later as well. Okay, so that will be the overall goal. All right. Any questions there? Nope. Okay. Feel free to just unmute yourself and let me know if there are any questions. Okay. Cool. So I can still see that some of you guys have not gone through the study material yet. So please try to do this ASAP. Whoever is spending, I'll not be spending any time here. What we'll be doing is we'll be directly diving into. So today is 22nd, right? So now we'll be doing our very first code review, which is ideal animation, run animation, okay, crouch animation. So this one is due tonight. So let's look at this one. Okay. Yeah. All right. So okay. So first things first. Uh, you can see links are different, and I can quickly tell that these links are actually not correct. Can somebody tell me why? Why are there different kind of links, and which one is actually the correct link? Can anybody point it out? Okay, so Manas says these aren't pull requests. Okay. Mm, okay. So does anybody understand what Manas just said, that these aren't pull requests? What does that mean? Yeah. Okay. So if these aren't pull requests, so hopefully the instructions here are clear that you have to create a new branch, right? And you have to make a pull request to your own repository and not to the Outscale one, okay? And then share that link. So here, if I see, I can already tell that, majority of these are not something that I can review, right? And I'll show you why, okay? So here, this is, so Abhishek has posted a link, but that link is for a specific branch in his project. So if I open this, I'll show you why we do pull request. And, we talked about this last time, but I can demonstrate it now. So this one is going to a specific branch. Just looking at the link, and I can tell that, right? Because it says tree and then slash something, right? So this is basically going into a branch called feature one animation, right? Millen's link is basically the root of the repository itself. So if I open this, I'll see the main readme file and everything, right? So this will be the root place where the project is. Same way is here as well, Naveen as well, right? Pooja's link is also similar to Abhishek's link, where it's pointing to the first feature that you guys are working on, but this isn't a pull request. Same with Sai Harish link as well. This is the, because it ends with the .git, it's the root, same as Naveen's, same as Millen's, right? So instead, this one is the correct link, okay? Because this one has pull dash something. So this is the port, like I couldn't see Vishal. So this one is also the root. So Vishali's link is also the root link. This is the kind of link that you will going forward submit for all your code reviews. Okay. And I'll show you right now why. So I've opened all the other ones. I haven't opened every, but it will give you an idea. So Abhishek's link directly takes me to the specific branch, right? So if you remember here, we were looking at uh, the branch, right? So when I open, it looks like the same repo, but it's inside this branch and not the regular branches. So if I say view all branches, there is a master branch, feature branch, webinar branch. So by default, I've come to the feature branch, and you can see it here as well. Okay. So this is, I think, Millions. So Millions was ending with a .git. So, I am on the master branch itself, right? I'm not on the animation branch. I'm on the master branch. So the default branch. Same with, I think Pooja's link was also pointing to the feature branch. So as you can see, it's on the feature branch, right? Here, this was the correct link in terms of the pull request. Now here you see it looks very different from what everybody else's view looks like, right? And this is where majority of the code reviews are going to happen, right? So here, uh, the developer is saying, I want to merge from animation branch into master branch, and I've made some changes. Okay, so whoever is reviewing will come here and check out what exactly has been changed. Let me zoom in a little bit and increase the size. So I'm going to jump in here, and now this will precisely tell me what are all the changes that are committed and are going to be going in if I allow these changes to go in, right? Here we don't see any code as such, because right now we're just working on animations. We haven't yet gotten to actually doing code pieces yet, but it gives you still an idea of what exactly has changed here, right? um, Manvik, do you guys use pull requests as part of your code review practices, etc., as well within
Yeah,
the company?
yeah, that is the same. So we have to review it before merging to the main or a master branch. So it's a best practice, because if some junior programmer is there and he whatever he's trying to do, but he don't know about the other code, what could have done the other code. So that is the best practice we should follow.
Hmm.
So everyone knows that this is feature, what exactly this feature and how we have wrote the code. So everybody, the reviewer will get to know, yeah, this is correct or not. So it will give you like this. that flexibility that you are not getting more bugs in your production build.
Yeah, so this is typically like, the flow that majority of the companies actually use, or at least the good companies would end up using the same flow for all kind of code reviews. Okay, so this is going forward. This is what I expect you guys to do. So everybody else, what I want you guys to do right now is just go into your GitHub and create a pull request going from your feature branch to your own master branch, and just update this link again. So update the submission to generate this, because all the people who have the feature branch set up, you can create a pull request within literally 30 seconds going onto the website into your own repo. So just go ahead, do this, and quickly update the link, and just let me know in the chat once you guys have updated. Okay, so we can
So,
take a quick break.
Mayank,
Yeah.
if I have more than, I mean, if I have more branches, so all the pull requests will be on the same page, right? Or
Correct. Correct. So here you can
yeah.
see, if you go to the main page, right, you have this tab for pull requests. So
Hmm.
if you have multiple pull requests open, like I can see that there is one pull request from June 9th, another one from June 9th, and then one is 6 hours ago, right? So this gives me a quick overview of all the pull requests that right now are open and pending review, right? And then anyone who's reviewing it, chances are I'm reviewing this one.
Yeah.
Say Manmeet is reviewing this one, right? So
Mhm.
these two can be independent of each other, right? That's the beauty of this whole system, where Manmeet say, all right, whatever this feature is good to go, right? And he has given you a thumbs up. He's merged your changes into master, and this pull request is now closed, and you don't need to work on it, right? But I say, these changes that are done today as part of, say, the firing system or the animation system, these are not good. It has still some bugs. I might leave some code review comments inside this, and then we'll basically be able to fix them, so you can continue working on this. And now they're independent of each other, right? So the movement system is independent, firing system is independent, assuming this is like, say, the firing system. And
Yeah.
now this can go separately, movement can go separately, and they're not blocked on each other, right? So,
Okay.
correct? Yeah.
Then I should open this link and then share
Correct.
this. Yeah.
So correct. So
Yeah.
now when I open this up, whatever you get here, right? So this
Uh,
now again looks like full dash a
yeah.
number, right? So this is the kind of link that you should be submitting in your code review.
Classroom. Yeah.
Correct. Correct. Good.
Yeah.
All right. Good. So okay. So while we are here, so when you approve the pull request, that's when the feature branch will be merged with the master branch. That's correct, Prashant. So typically, like, so me and Manmeet are right now like reviewers, right? But if your company has single reviewers, some companies have multiple reviewers, depends on the complexity and the seriousness of the feature that you're working on, right? So they will have different kind of workflows. Once the reviewer approves, that's when you're allowed to merge it to the, I would not say it's just the master branch.
Right.
Sometimes it will follow another branch as well, right? So, Manmeet, you said right. Any specific reason for that?
So there might be many specific so suppose we want to support two versions of the game at the same time. So then we have to manage two branches for the two specific versions. So that time we, instead of merging to the master branch, we'll merge that particular version specific branch. So there are many scenarios, like it depends on the project and how we are handling that.
Right. So I think last time, if you guys remember, I might have mentioned something about the dev branch, or at least in the study material, I'm pretty sure we covered the concept of a dev branch as well, right? So, if let's say Prashant, your current feature is good, it will go to maybe a dev branch, right? And from dev branch, once the entire team has tested, the changes have been, not just your changes, but actually like the entire features that are proposed to go for, say, the next release, right? Or the next update that is going to the Play Store. Once all those are tested by the QA team and everybody else, then they move to the master branch, and from there they might go to the production branch, things like that. So there can be multiple branches along the way, but the idea is that from the most, think about it as like a permission level, right? Your branch is like the lowest, then comes like the dev, then comes like the master, then comes like the production branch, right? So something like that is the hierarchy, and every step there will be some kind of an approval system in the steps as well, right? So QA might approve some, product managers might approve others, something like that. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some idea there. Manvi, are you guys using something more complex than this? Because I know one team, or at least one of my previous teams, used to use something very complex that we had set up because of the complexity of the project itself.
So current, in current project, we are not using Git. We are using Plastic. If you're aware of, man, that is supported by Unity itself, integrated in Unity, and they have
Wait,
collaborated
what's
with
the
Unity.
what's the name?
Plastic SCM. So in the Plastic SEM, you have like a good UI, and when in terms of the branching, it's very useful because it will give you some sort of UI elements on that. So there will be different nodes each and every branch is having, instead of like naming, like how we use in Git. So that's the reason. So you can see the below image, yeah. So in that we can see the branching stuff. So that is very helpful in when you are handling a lot of branching stuff.
Sir, your mic is
Okay,
off.
my bad.
You are mute, Meg. Yeah.
My bad. Sorry, guys. So I was saying that there are other
Perf-
version control systems like Perforce as well, and there was another one.
SVN is also there.
No, SVN is shared. SVN
Yeah,
CD
it's a
is like
shit, but yeah,
shared.
for basic, like to get the
Yeah.
uh, to start with the SVN, it's good, I guess, because
No, I think
yeah,
SVN is like 10 years old.
right.
So please don't use SVN anymore. If your company is using SVN, just kill whoever is responsible and replace it. But generally, what I was referring to is, so one problem game development industry specifically has that other industries don't have. Uh, does anybody know actually what's like? Can anybody guess what exactly is a specific problem when it comes to game development in the context of version control and managing, a hierarchy and archives of files and whatnot? Can anybody take a guess as to what a typical problem game development specifically has that other industries might not have? Anyone? No, prefabs is something specific to Unity. I'm talking about general. Uh, because obviously game development is more sort of, artistic versus if you were in a similar kind of a company building, say, an Android application or a iOS application, right? There isn't that art component to it, right? So think along those lines. If that, I think that's a big enough hint. Uh, Correct, large files. So assets and large files, absolutely. So 3D models that can be really heavy, etc. as well, right? So if you look for this, there is something called as Git LFS. So basically, it's called Git large file support or large file system, something, whatever, large file storage. So this is sort of like a specific thing just to handle bigger files in Git, right? Git did not naturally come by default, internally built, and that's where a lot of previous game companies used to use Perforce and stuff, because it let you manage a lot of these larger files, which can potentially even run into GBs, right? Like imagine if you imagine you're building a full-fledged, MMO or something. Uh, think of some complex game. A single scene file can be a GB. And I'm not kidding. It can be literally a GB. So those cases, Assassin's Creed type games, right? So Perforce and others are actually better for assets, while for code and these smaller files, Git is better. So that's where I think, a lot of companies were using this, but since Git has added large file support, generally, I think companies have now consolidated a lot towards using Git internally as well. But again, I don't know, Manveer, anything else to add to this? I think Manveer's stuck, or am I stuck? Wait, am I stuck? No, I'm.
But you cut off for few minutes.
Okay, cool. One second. Chat. Okay, cool. So yeah, large files is absolutely critical, and this is something that you guys should be aware of. That okay, if as a company you join and they end up are using Perforce, or something like even Plastic SEM. I don't know. Does Plastic has something custom for large file support as well?
So basically, that is supported by Unity, and they bought it, I guess. So they are supporting the large files as well.
Got it. They probably should be, because I'm guessing that's the key thing that majority, merge very good with branch merging. Okay, interesting. I'll have to check.
Directory,
I'll
yeah.
have to check this out as well. See what extra workflows that you can do with this. Yeah. Okay. So here you see, right, like the second, in terms of the list of second shit itself, it's binaries, and these are like art documents. Exactly what we were just discussing. So they want to say yes, 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 to everything. So. Cool. I think slightly off topic, but yeah. So one more thing I'll touch on is, uh, can somebody tell me what exactly is all this that we are seeing? Even though we are just adding animations, we have started adding animations, and I'm not going to review animations right now because there's no code here. But does anybody understand what exactly is this? What am I seeing a difference of? So these things are like removed lines. These things are added lines. Can somebody explain what the fuck is happening on this? Project settings. Okay. Not really. Anything
So
else?
maybe we're adding a lot more variables and values to those variables.
We're adding a lot more variables. What kind of variables? When you say variables, what exactly do we mean? Like variables inside. We haven't created any scripts, anything. We haven't created any code. Sachin is saying animator parameters. Animator parameters, okay. How do we know these are such an animator parameters? When we change anything in the inspector, that data, okay. So Vikramaditya is saying we change something in the inspector, names match animator parameters, okay. Okay. Anything else? So can we read this information and actually make some sense of it? I can zoom in if you want, but just going through this alone, right? I mean, hopefully, that, um, hopefully you guys know that right now we haven't created any, C# files, right? So this is not a C# file typically, right? So we haven't written any code, but what exactly is this? Is this information something readable, right? Do we get some sense out of it? What exactly is happening here? So we got something like, parameters for things that we are doing in the inspector, something to do with the inspector data, settings of the controller and other components used by the animator, okay? Settings of the controller and the other components used by the animator, interesting, okay? Manmeet, care to share some light here?
So, like when we are creating any file, so it could be in text format or a binary format. So like .scene files are there, .controller file is there. So basically it's a .controller file. So as Joy said, like setting for controller and the other component used by animator. So those fields are related to the controller as controller only. So in controller, you will be having like I I mean, Mike, they do have.
Manmeet broke off. Okay, let me just quickly read through the chat as well. Settings for the controller and other components. Okay, yeah, that's what I said. Stuff like exit times, animation keyframes, exit times, animation keyframes. Okay, so while you guys are able to, uh, read through this information, um, is there a general pattern that you see? Right? I mean, you guys highlighted out there's something to do with the settings or the animator parameters or the exit time, animation keyframes, animation triggers and whatnot, right? Is there a general, something like a theme? Like, does it look like a pattern of things to you? Or does it look like a theme of information? Beyond just the animation stuff. Anything? There is a block for run and a block for crouch. Okay. Let's quickly check. If I do control F, run. Wait, there's no run. Where is run? Let's see. Oh, 1 second. Here. Crouch. Okay. So we saw crouch here. Let's see here what's happening. Let's expand this file out as well. So yes, we do see something like name crouch. Okay. There is a block for run and a block for crouch animation. Okay. The M conditions for each animation blocks are repeated for each of the M conditions. The M conditions of each animation blocks are repeated. Okay. 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 So essentially what you're seeing here is basically Unity's ways of tracking shit at the end of the day. Okay. So while we might be doing a lot of drag and drop, right? But Unity still needs to save that information, right? And what you're seeing here in this diff, right? Diff means nothing but, uh, a delta or a change, right? So all this stuff in white has not changed. All this stuff is red is gone, right? It's been deleted or modified, right? But all this stuff in here in green is new things that has been added, right? So in this case, all we are doing is we are looking at how Unity interprets this information that we have given it. Okay, does this make sense? So when I go and create a new parameter inside my animator window, so I can see there is this section called animator parameters, right? And under this section, right, if you look at the indentation, there is one parameter called speed, one parameter called crouch, right? So, and then you have all of these settings under this, right? And then you have all of these settings under this one. Okay, does that make sense? So essentially, all we are doing is we are defining the information that we created inside all these different windows inside the Unity's, editor, right? Like you have the animation editor, you have the inspector view, you have the project view. Everything that you change slightly, even a little bit here and there, Unity still needs to store that information. It needs to capture that information so that next time it shows you exactly that information. All you're saying is like the behind the scenes of it. Okay. So if I come down, now you have some conditions defined here as well, right? So without looking at how your animations are set up inside Unity, I can just look at this data and tell you what exactly you're trying to do or where you might be doing something wrong. So here you have seen that there is a condition for transition, right? So, you set a transition based on the value of speed. If there is a speed above 0.25, you're doing a transition. Below 2.5, you're not doing a transition, right? So you've set up a value and defined where that transition point is. And I can tell by looking at this itself without going into the Unity editor. So if you understand how to read this information, you'll be able to quickly, grasp what exactly has been changed just by looking at the differences or code reviews diff on GitHub or even offline, etc. Right? Doesn't matter. So looking at this information alone, you can tell very easily what's happening inside Unity. Okay, and senior programmers and engineers will be able to tell this information very quickly, right? So because they're used to looking at this shit pretty much day in, day out. Okay. Good. Does that make sense? So here you can see, in our inspector, we always end up setting up positions, right? And we know positions can be X, Y, Z, right? There are um, three variables. So your X direction, Y direction, and Z direction. In this case, because we are dealing with a 2D game, right? You can see that the Z value is 0, right? That Z value doesn't change because we don't really need Z value to change. Z value represents depth, remember? So it's only about X and Y, right? Horizontal and vertical. In 2D, we are just dealing with these two, and you can see these are the positions that we're defining. Right? So just looking through this, I can quickly tell what exactly is happening. I don't need to actually load your entire project into, my Unity environment in order for me to tell what is exactly happening, but just by looking through this itself. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions? Sorry, you dropped?
Yeah, there is some power issue, so it dropped.
Ah,
So I lost it.
got it. Okay. So, any questions, guys, so far?
Sir, how do we analyze the code? What happening while seeing this line codes?
So this is not code, first of all.
How we analyze what happening in my code? You are saying that by looking of this, what happening in that. So how
Yeah.
do we know that? How do we analyze that?
So you'll analyze it once you start to read it. Okay. And it's not that difficult because I can see here you're defining the parameters, right? So whatever is listed here is all parameters. You just need to make sense of, okay, what are these animation parameters, right? Then you can see there are animators layers. Then you have your state transitions, right? So all you're doing is you're just reading through this information to make sense of it. And once you start to understand what represents what, yeah, you will be able to make sense of what exactly is happening, right? But one thing I do want to make it clear, this what we are looking at, it is not code. Okay, so based on what you just asked, right now we are not reviewing code. What are we reviewing? If you're not reviewing code, what is this specifically? Anyone? This is not code, right? What is this?
These are basically Unity settings which we have applied in the editor itself, right?
Correct. So, right. So basically data, right? So Murtaza is right there. If you're not looking at code, we're looking at data. This is just raw data. If I take this text file, right? If I just copy paste this entire shit out into a text file and transfer it over to another project and just rename the file there to player.controller, it will actually magically show up. I mean, there will be some issues as well, and I'll just talk quickly about it, what is issue. But ideally, it should actually translate. Okay. Cool. Make sense? So what we are reviewing right now is actually data and how Unity is going to treat that data, right? depending on what it means. Every part of data has some meaning, right? If I create a class called player and I put inside it score, health, score and health both can be integers, but they, in the context of my project, they mean very different things, right? I will not score, I will not store health in a high score, right? Because just because it's an integer, right? Same way here, right? So it's all about understanding what that data represents, right? So that's what's important. Cool. So one thing I do want to highlight more on top of it here is specifically this line, this one. Does anybody know what exactly this line means? File ID something. Anyone? Anyone wants to?
I think it is a project ID.
It's a project ID. What do you mean by project ID?
Like while we are creating a project in the Unity.
Okay, so do you mean like this ID is common for the entire project?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think it belongs to the file which is actually connected to that state, that specific state which we were looking at. Hello.
Yeah. Go ahead. So
So
you're saying basically it belongs to the particular file.
yeah.
Any file, any specific file. We can see, right? I just searched for file ID. We can see there are a bunch of these file ID zeros, right? And some have numbers, some don't have. And you can see this through and through. You can open any pull request. You can open
Looks
your
like
own
a
pull
prefab
request.
instance, doesn't it? Some kind of prefab instance which we are using in state changing, perhaps.
Okay. Manas is saying, I think there are animation clips. So all of them are animation clips. Prashant is saying they're imported files. Okay. Way of storing all, it's Unity's way of storing all different files. Okay. So it seems like we're getting some answers. Manvi, do you know about this file ID thing?
So yeah, as Unity keep tracks of the IDs, what are the file IDs are changing. So because it has to load while we are playing into the Unity, so it's keep tracking all the file IDs.
Right, but like, what's the reason for this ID? Why create an ID? Why can't I say, okay, run animation dot controller, jump animation dot controller, whatever, right? So why can't I just do that?
So in that case, in our project, there could be many controllers, not one. So in that case, how to distinguish those file IDs? So better to give unique ID for them. So whenever we are changing anything, so it will give a unique ID, so we can identify them.
So what do you mean by changing anything specifically? Anything specific there?
Like so, has we can say in m underscore transition, we have two file IDs get added. Okay, so we have changed some properties of in this transition. So
Hmm.
those properties, it is saying it's saving as a unique ID. In future, if we are adding more than, so it will again give the particular ID, so it can see what are the changes and always have a unique ID.
Got it. Yeah. So I think you hinted at one specific thing. Does anybody else wants to add to that as well? Anyone? So Manas is saying they keep track of it. They keep track of it using ID, storing all different files. Wouldn't storing all that take too much space? I am not sure what you mean by storing all that. Maybe I don't know. Maybe if you make sense of. Manas, you might want to.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, so instead of say like you mentioned, like using names for dot controller, then because you're storing all this, I am guessing as a string or something. So maybe that would take too much space, and is parsing everything would also take a lot of time. So instead of that, maybe you just use these numbers to keep track of everything. So every different file gets a proper unique ID, which may or may not be, which should not be the same for every different file that's in the project.
Okay, so I want to switch focus 1 second here. So we are saying every time Unity wants to refer to something that is a file, it uses some kind of this ID, right? And your argument right now is ID is easier because ID is something like an integer, right? For it's probably not an integer because it's too long a number, but
Yeah,
it's some form of integer. Let's just assume for now that it's an integer for simplicity, right? But instead, if I was say using the name itself, this would be something like a string, correct?
yeah,
So your argument is it's easier to store everywhere where I want to store this information, file ID and something as integer is easier versus string.
yeah. So
Basically, this will be like less space and this will be more space.
yeah,
Yeah. But isn't there some place where you'll have to store this ID and the actual string as well? Right? How do you know this ID goes to this string? You'll have to store this information somewhere as well, right?
I think prefab does those kind of things. I guess the objects.
Have you created any prefab so far?
I mean, not exactly prefab, but if we are using an object, an instance of an object, that specific moment, that object itself has its name and IDs and everything related to it under it, right? So
Forget prefabs. I haven't talked about it. Forget it. Remove it from your mind. Right? Like when people know too much things ahead, they get confused too much. Right? So come back to Mother Earth. We haven't talked about prefabs. Do not mention prefabs. So think fundamental.
yeah. So
Sir, what?
the object has this thing, right? A string, an ID, the game, any object.
Okay.
Sir,
Somebody
can
else was
I
saying.
try?
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Sir, I think, sir, we are not using string because the name of the file a user can change. So maybe if we hard code that string, then it will cause problem. That's why we're using the ID. As ID is something assigned by Unity, and
But then
name
again, we
of the
use the
file is
naming
something
convention
assigned by
to
user.
actually call few objects from our code, right? Like there is this like find game object with tag, find game object with names and like this.
that also sir has not discussed.
Yeah, don't jump ahead. But okay, so one new point that was brought up was this renaming stuff, right? So what happens if I rename my file, right? Then wherever this FID, if FID was not used, instead it was something like fname, right? And it was going to clear dot controller, right? We just saw this name, right? What if instead of ID, it was something like this, where it was referring to a specific file? So I think Manmeet also brought this up. What happens if there are multiple files by that name, right? So that was one argument that even Manmeet mentioned, right? But in that case, so if you have duplicate files with duplicate names, right? You can have that. You can have multiple files with, player.controller. Any solution that can be easily fixed for this duplicate issue? Anyone has any solution? Manmeet, even if you have.
So for the duplicate issue, to resolve it, so we need to give a particular ID to that. So it will be a unique ID which is generated by internal to,
Without the ID.
oh,
There is a
without the
solution
ID.
without the ID.
Okay.
So just by the names itself, is there some solution that we can use? Anything that comes to mind? And here's my hint for that. Murtaza is saying timestamps, maybe, but no. So here's the hint. Think Windows. Windows operating system. Think.
Sir, for duplicate, what Windows does it like provides a number after the string.
Correct.
For a copy.
Correct, exactly. So basically all you're trying to do is inside a single folder, when you create a file, right, the whole path of that file is always unique, right, including the name of the file, right? So this is a folder and this is a specific name, say name.txt or something, right? But if you create another name.txt, Windows will automatically attach something inside it, right? 01, 02, 03, some shit like that, right? Just to make it unique, right, within the name, while you're trying to save it. So you can do something like that where you change this path, change this name to be a full path. So something like X, Y, Z, and then player dot controller, right? So that's one solution that you can use, that instead of referring to a file by a name, replace it with a full path. This will never be duplicated, because the moment you try to save another file called player.controller inside a path called XYZ, Unity will say, oh, you can't save it because I know there is already a file by that name. So I'm going to put p01.control, right? So I'm just going to put a 01 in there because I know you're trying to create a duplicate. So that is one solution that can work without an ID. So just because Unity is using ID doesn't mean as an interviewer, I don't want you to come up with other solutions. I want to see and test how you think, right? So don't just go back to the ID world like a lot of you guys were suggesting, right? But think first on what the problems are going to come, right? Cool. So now going back to the ID, I think this is primarily the reason. I don't remember who suggested it, but basically anytime I changed my file names, I don't want all the places where I'm using that file. File can be anything. It can be a text file, it can be a JSON file, it can be a prefab, it can be blah, blah, blah. It can be an image that you have imported into the project. So far, all you have done is imported images, right? So if I stored the names of the images as it is, right now your images are, I'll go back to the game here. If I go to code and let's check it out quickly. Yeah, so inside assets, you have all of these animations, right? Art, animations, clips, I think.
The images are in sprites.
Wait, images are in sprites. Can somebody redirect me to the right folder location? Assets. It should be under game assets, right? Art.
So from art, we need to
Okay.
move to sprites.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So animated sprites. So then, yeah, I think we changed the structure. I think animations. Yeah. So here, if we have idle, right? Tomorrow I could change these names from 0001 to 10001, right? But I don't want all the animations that I've set up, and those will break if I'm not using an ID like system, right? So if you look at this, right, this will get converted into an ID, right? And where do you think all this information is stored, right? So if I quickly go back here, right, when I was talking about, I think somebody was saying this information, right, ID to a string, when I said we'll have to store this information. Does anybody know where this is now getting stored? Because we need IDs, right? IDs are tracking which file do they represent. Does anybody know where this information is stored now?
So is it the meta file which we could see in the meta.meta file?
Absolutely correct. So basically all this meta files that Unity creates for every file that you see, that is where all this information is. And now because we have looked at a specific text version of the diff, now this will make sense, right? And the ID that we are looking for right now is this. Okay, so this is the unique ID basically that Unity is going to generate, which is going to be unique for every file in your entire project. Doesn't matter what the extension of the file is, doesn't matter what the type of that file is, doesn't matter where you use it or you use it or you don't use it. As long as that file is existing in your project, Unity has access to it. It's going to create a meta file for it, and it's going to assign it a GUID. As long as these GUIDs don't get fucked up, right, you will not lose your mappings. Okay, so if you look at this file format, it says specific number, which means Unity know that this is a specific type file format, right? And then it is GUID, and then these properties are going to change depending on what is the type of the file, right? Because here we are dealing with an image of a specific number. That's why you see this texture properties, right? And things like that. Okay. And you can read through these as well to make sense of what exactly is happening, right? So here it's part of some sprite sheet as well, right? And you can see there is a sprite ID, etc. as well as attached to it. So same way how we were reading that data, this is also nothing but data. Okay, make sense? Manu, anything else to add to this?
Yeah, I think so. You have added, like you have already mentioned about the file format. Yeah, that is correct. So Unity is giving different file version for different formats. Based on that, it will be generating the fields. What are the fields available? So basically, it's a data. So it depends on the version what we are using.
Correct. So this is a good experiment that you guys can run. You can go around, open any of these images inside Unity, and play around with the inspector data, right? Like you change some of the properties. Say you change the compression ratio, or you change some other property, and you just save it. You save the project, right? You open up the meta file, and you'll see the relevant properties change, right? So I can see that the maximum texture size is set up to be 2048, right? So I don't need to open Unity to check that because I can read through here itself, right? So if suddenly tomorrow I see, Manmeet has just made a commit where all the texture sizes have gone from 1024 to 2048, double the size, right? And I know if I approve that change, my game's APK size is probably going to increase because now the textures have increased in size, right? And then I'm going to go back to Manmeet and ask, hey, Manmeet, why did you make this change, right? Are the quality of the images low that you had to increase the size? Are we seeing like blurriness in the images on our devices, etc., right? So what is happening that we had to make this change? And those are the kind of things that senior engineers and team leads are looking at when they're doing code reviews, right? They can pick up on these things through differences in your commits, right? Like the same thing that we were looking at the diff right here, right? Imagine instead of this full green, I just see one line saying, max texture size has been changed. I immediately know. I don't have to sit through finding through Unity as to what has been changed. I just know, all right, this is the exact property that Manmeet has changed on this specific file. Saves us a lot of time for fixing bugs and finding issues. Okay, make sense? Anything else to add on generally this whole ecosystem of MetaFile? Anything else, Mani? Did I
No,
miss it?
no, I think so. That's all. You cover all the points.
Cool. There is some really fancy shit that you can do with MetaFiles. Can you guys think of what logically is possible if you have access to all this raw information regarding files? Just logically think. Don't try to technically think about how you would implement stuff, but what can you do as a developer, as an engineer? If I gave you this raw information that you have this big project with thousands of files, you can potentially read through all the meta files, what all can you do? Make changes outside the editor? Absolutely. That can be a very powerful thing, right? So you don't need to change, imagine, Manmeet and I were working on some optimization problem, right? That our game is too big in size. We say, all right, there are at least 2000 images in our game, and let's do this, that let's reduce all the images to half the maximum size. So if something is at 2048, let's turn it down to 1024. If something is at 1024, let's turn it down to 512, right? So let's reduce the quality and the size of the assets so that our APK size condenses. Now imagine us being an engineer and having to do that manually, sitting through and making changes to 2000 images in your game manually, just changing the settings. It's boring as fucking hell, right? But you write a script that just goes and changes this outside Unity's editor, and now voila, your job is probably done in like half an hour. So I think that's a very beautiful use case that you can now start to make changes just because you know what this shit does, right? What all you can do with it. It's a simple file. It's a simple text file, right? It's just called .meta, but you can see it's a simple text file. What else? Anything else? And Manit, you also please add if you have anything specific.
Yep.
Okay. Any other things that you guys can think of? Nope. Okay, let me show something here. Test out our new features. Not sure I understand what you mean. Test out new features. How? Like something you want to see implemented. Not sure I completely understand. Maybe if you can explain verbally, what exactly do you mean? See this. Something you want to see implemented and aren't sure if it is possible. Okay, interesting. Not sure I understand exactly what exactly that means, but maybe so. Say Unity only allows me to have a certain maximum texture size. I mean, if Unity doesn't allow you to do something, then no matter you directly hacking the file, probably still gonna make Unity crash. I mean, that's my guess at least. I haven't stress tested it enough, right? So eventually, imagine, right? Like I can change the settings of this file and say, where did that file go, right? So I can change this max texture size setting to 1024, but it still needs to be that Unity needs to recognize this as 1024, right? So I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to get at as well, but maybe there is something there that I just haven't understood yet. Is there more references to it here? Good. Okay. Okay. See games used in console, in-game console. Yeah, I think that's something different. In-game consoles are different. Okay, so here's one use case. I'll tell you quickly. So imagine now you have access to all of these GUIDs, right? Which represent each asset, each file very uniquely in your project, right? I want to say that we have imported a lot of stuff in our projects. I want to get rid of all the nonsense that we're not using, right? I want to say that, okay, now we are ready to go live and publish this game, but I want the lowest possible size of my game. So let's remove all the crap that we are not using. Can you use this information to figure out how you would do that? Can we make use of some information here? Think. Anyone? Nope. Dead silence. Anything?
So
Anything?
Yes.
Oh wait, am
I
I
think so
break?
someone is asked to repeat.
Cool. So okay, my question is, my game is ready to go live. Okay. Over the course of 2 years that we have been working on this game, we have added a lot of plugins, we have added a lot of images, we have added a lot of shit assets, but a lot of them are not used, right? They're not actually getting used in the final version of the game. So is there something that we can do using this information to figure out what is all the crap in my game that I'm actually not using, and I can remove them so that they don't make my game size big.
so does a meta file show if they're being referenced by other files that we use? I mean, does it contain
No.
that information if it's being referenced?
So we know that each meta file belongs to one specific file, right? And it has its own unique ID, right? Looking here, right? So instead of directly answering your question, I'm just gonna control F. So we call it just GUID, right? Anytime I want to refer to this unique ID, I'm gonna call it GUID, right? GUID, GUID. So I'm just gonna do control F GUID and leave this out there in front. So now you tell me. So this is a diff, right? This is a diff of sample. Sorry, this is not the diff. Yeah, we're looking at the diff, but this is basically the Unity scene file. Remember?
Yeah.
Fine.
So now you see something with highlighted GUID, and we know that here we were looking at GUIDs inside our meta file.
Yeah,
So
like I said, like if we can keep track of all the GUIDs and just cross-reference, like if a GUID is not being referenced by any other file, we can just delete it because it's not in use anywhere.
okay, you can just create a script to check what GUIDs are being referenced by other than. Okay, so same thing. Yeah, okay. Anyone else? Did everybody understand what Manas said? Yes? No? Yeah? Okay? No? Okay. Mandeep, could you just quickly explain what exactly Manas was trying to say as well?
So as Meng said, there is each and every file is having a GUID, and that is having some particular number. So what we can do, we can find that particular ID in all the scenes what we are containing in our project. So here Meng give an example, sample scene.unity. So this is the particular whole file. So we can find the reference of that particular GUID, and if it is there, then that this scene is using that particular file. If it is not, that means we are not using that particular file.
Correct. And I can go one step further. Okay. So first, what I've done is I've built some kind of internal, information table which says, okay, this specific file is used in this specific place, right? I tried to find through all the GUIDs and I matched them, right? So I know this GUID is here. If this GUID shows up here, that means this specific file that I was looking at is being used inside this sample scene, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah. So if I'm able to map that information, right, I can take it one step further. I just don't want to say, is this file used? Tick. If it's not used, cross, remove, right? But for the tick case, I can keep track of where all it is used. How many places is it used as? Is it just used at one place or is it used at 20 places? Right? And accordingly make better decisions about my game, right? If I see one audio file getting used at only one place, right, and it is a freaking 500 MB file, maybe I want to cut it out because it's only used at one place. It is used, but maybe it is only used at one place, right? And it's not very important. It's like some background effect. For some reason, it's just 500 MB, right? That's absolutely nonsense. Cut it down. So you can make a lot more smart decisions about your project by having this kind of information, right? And all of this that we're talking about has actually nothing to do with gameplay, has nothing to do with game design. It is all about game tools, right? Tools that you can build to make your project successful, right? And this is one industry that gets heavily underlooked because you're not working on some fancy gameplay jump animation or some bullet time max pain effect, but this is critical pieces of information that are needed to be done in order to make sure your project is still successful, right? So all of this information is super important, and that's what separates from like amateurs from pros, right? So the whole idea to dive a little bit deeper here was to give you exposure to things that often get overlooked by a lot of the entry level developers, but you guys need to be aware of so that you can use these to your advantage. Okay. Will the file have a GUID even if it is not used anywhere? Absolutely, Prashant. So every file that is inside Unity will, when you open the first time a project, right, there is a whole importing any like the slider that says importing project, and it takes fucking forever if it's a big project, right? If you've ever tried to import a big project, everybody would have faced that problem. That is where Unity is actually generating all these meta files. That is exactly what it's doing. It's trying to understand the format of all the files. It's trying to convert it. It's trying to generate these meta files and save all this information, right? So that is the whole process of importing a project. Okay. And then sort of it does this other things which obviously are like, if you have other game objects, and I think we saw here, let me see, game. Yeah, so here you can see inside the scene itself, inside the scene file, there is a separate section for game objects, right? Yeah, so game objects. So it's showing you all the different game objects, and each game object will also have a unique ID, right? So if you move things around, everything is tracked based on that ID. So today, if you have a camera by the name camera and you drag it into some script which needs camera, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself just as an example, right? But if I change the game object name of camera to something else, the reference that I drag drop somewhere else didn't break. Why? Because everything inside, which is an object, is also given an ID, right? So you can see this game object, this light is referring to a game object, which is actually an ID. So it's the same concept that we just talked about, but we were talking it in terms of context of files, but here it's applied to even game objects. So pretty much the same concept of decoupling a name, okay, to something unique, right? What we just discussed here on the whiteboard, right? That is all there is, right? So all we are trying to do is that we want to use something, right? We have some file name. We want to use this file name, but if we use directly, that means we are building a direct relationship between where this file is and what its name is and where it is used. Instead, we want to break this direct link and insert an ID in between. So now this can change, right? As long as this ID doesn't change, wherever it is used, it doesn't need to change. The user will say, okay, this is the ID. ID will convert into a file. So whenever you rename the file, only this information needs to be changed here. This relationship doesn't change. So all you have done is added a thing in the middle. That's fundamental problem solving that you'll use in your own logic as well. And this is exactly what's happening in these IDs. Make sense? Okay. Manoj, anywhere else you've used these kind of strategies? And you guys also tell me if you guys have used these kind of strategies anywhere else, or at least seen these strategies used somewhere else.
Mayank, I have a doubt actually.
Yeah, good.
So मैं क्या सोच रहा था? It's fine to actually use IDs to actually map the things out. But if we are looking at a big project, mapping it might actually make it a big process to read, right? Like so many files to check and so many things to see in that. There might, like, we might get extra data, like unused data a lot, but still reading it might take a lot of time and it becomes a very hectic process in that also.
Reading what will take time?
So mapping IDs, I mean, what I was thinking, like, how can I map IDs with the other things? Like Unity does not give us, like Unity has its own thing, right? Inside, like it has this, it uses these all meta files to actually map things. But just for the sake of understanding, just for one specific point, कि like ये वाला use हो रहा है कि नहीं, ये वाला object use हो रहा है कि नहीं, ऐसे के लिए तो कुछ है नहीं ना उसमें मैपिंग करने। यूनिटी का ऐसा कुछ तो मैपिंग करता
So
नहीं
you
है।
have to, no, Unity is just giving you access to all the data. You have to come up with a solution if you need it or not, right? You're not going to need it on every project, right? So I'm not sure I understand what exact question you have, but if I understood correctly, all you're saying is key. Here I have this information. In one column I have IDs, and in other columns I have specific names and location of where my files are, right? So I'm managing some kind of a table, if you think about it, right? So I have ID 001, some XYZ file name, whatever X dot Y, and then some, location like a path, right? So this 001 will refer to this file in this location, correct? So wherever 001 gets used, I know it's referring to this, correct? Is that what you're asking?
हाँ वो भी है। I mean यूनिटी का तो खुद का रहता है। For R आपने बोला कि like उस IDs को हम लोग use कर सकते हैं to actually remove the ones which are not used, right? So we still need to have some kind of data like this. Like
Yeah.
इसमें
So
ID
Unity,
और
yeah. So Unity is not giving you access to this information, right? This is you'll have to build it yourself.
हाँ तो Unity editor code बनाना पड़ेगा, right?
Correct. You'll have to write your own scripts to generate this data. That's why I said initially, do not think about how you're going to implement it. Just think about logically what all you can do with this data. So right now we are not, I'm not posing a problem that how do you implement it. I'm just talking about logically what all you can do once you have access to this data. Access to data is more important, right? If I have access to data, I can do a lot of other shit as well. And we have just discussed few examples, right? There are more things like, oh, I can see this specific file is used in only these scenes, right? So I can do maybe something there, but it's not used in the rest of the game, right? So once the user has cleared these levels, I can just delete it because I know the user will never go play and it's not needed in future, something like that, right? So there's a lot more things that you can do depending on the kind of cases that you have.
गेम बिल्ड होने के बाद भी क्या हमारे पास एक्सेस रहता है उसका मेटा का?
No. So you're saying कि if I have at runtime, do I have access to the metadata, etc. as well? Remember, so now here what you're asking specifically is going a little bit into editor scripts. Unit. These will only run, and for rest of you who do not know what editor scripts are, don't worry. We'll touch base on it in future in one of the modules in future. But the idea is that these scripts only run inside Unity itself. When you build a mobile application, when you build a Xbox application or exe, these editor scripts will not be present in those. They are only for the tools that you're going to build to make your game successful. That's all. So they will only be running inside the editor. Okay. And we'll talk more details about editor scripts, etc. as well. Essentially, like the things that you are talking here, you'll be writing some kind of editor scripts to implement those. Okay. So anybody's interested can read up, but we'll touch on the topic of editor scripts later. Yeah, I mean, Vikram, like, we'll talk more details about how exactly you're going to dive into it. But yeah, Good. I think one thing I was just asking was, Mandeep, have you seen this kind of strategy getting used somewhere else as well? Like, did you guys ever try to implement this like name ID and then getting wherever it is used, etc.?
So yeah, you already mentioned one case where we want to find the unused assets in our project
Hmm.
to reduce the size. So that was the one case we had that thing ID and to remove that if that is not present in scene. That is the one case I find.
Got it. Okay. Good. Anyone else also? Like, have you guys seen this kind of a scenario getting used logically, right? Not exactly like Unity. It can be outside Unity as well. Anyone? No. Okay. Keep an eye out on it. Because uh, you know, like I can give you a very common example here. Uh, enums? No, not really. Okay, forget the programming world for a second. Think in the real world.
I, we've actually used editor scripting for level design in the past. Like at my
Hmm,
first job,
hmm.
so for designer basically just placed all the elements and everything was saved separately into the file after he clicks a button inside of the editor. Like
Yeah, yeah. So
so
I think
that
yeah, that's more like a specific use case for editor scripts, right?
yeah
Like what all things you can do with editor scripts, and you can actually do a lot of fancy shit.
yeah
So, the use case that you mentioned is fairly straightforward where an editor or a designer is doing something, then they go and press some custom button and, magically something happens and data gets stored everywhere, right? So those kind of specific use cases. Um, eh, but again, like editor is very powerful as well generally. But going back here, I was talking about some. Can you guys think of some real world examples of this system in place? Real world, like nothing to do with Unity or anything. And when I give you an example, you'll be like, duh, like oh fuck, like
All,
right.
I mean, school can roll numbers also.
Sure, roll numbers kind of example is works as well. Something even more generic on this lines also you can think of.
Even more generic.
Yeah, I mean, roll numbers is only for people in school, right? You and I are not in school. So, Sahil, employee data, sure, employee ID or something, right? Flat number. Exactly, Aadhaar card, right? Aadhaar card, driver's license, all of this information that applies to literally every fucking person on this country, right? If you go to US, like social security number, like this kind of information, all it is doing is just adding this layer of ID in between you and wherever your thing needs to be used, right? If you think of something more recent, like UPI ID, right? Your bank information on the back end can keep changing. If your UPI ID is the same, it just works, right? Email ID, right? The concept of inserting an ID in between and separating identity on one side and usage on the other side is exactly the same, right? And this logical concept gets used everywhere in real life without you guys realizing what you're doing, right? So try to think beyond just the basic coding terminologies, and see how shit is actually happening in the real world as well, right? Like there's code everywhere around us, like the Matrix kind of shit. So good, makes sense. So roll number was actually a good example as well, but yeah, there's more generic examples. Cool. I think so. Hopefully, you guys have gone back and updated your pull request. But like we saw, there isn't much to review for this one. Next class, when you start writing code for animations and implementations, that's when we'll start to dive more into specific code reviews and kind of doing proper code reviews, leaving feedback, and running through that flow as well, where you know me or Manmeet, whoever is here, will be basically just giving you feedback. Either somebody was asking regarding the approval thing, right? So we can leave a comment. We can request you to make further changes, which means it is not been approved, and the reviewer can approve it as well. So those are kind of things. I think somebody had asked very early on today in the class. I might have forgot to comment on it. So that's when we'll start diving into an official code review process as well. Okay, cool. So here there is some code. So this is Pooja. Okay, I think Pooja's worked on this a little bit before as well. That's why you can see some code pieces here, some stuff. But I think we'll try to review it next time all together once we start diving into it as well. I don't want to pick photos today by itself. Cool, guys. Anything specific? Anything else? Manmeet, anything specific that you want to add as well to the whole scene, editor, blah, blah discussion? Anything from your side?
Mm, in terms of coding,
Could be anything. Anything that might have been missed or anything others that, everybody should check out, etc. Something useful on some recent project, etc.
useful tips. So it depends on the how we are creating scenes and how we are loading it. I think so we can talk it in later stages, how to take care of those things.
Yeah, yeah. I think that'll come pretty much next time.
Right.
Uh, Scene loading stuff here we could see one
Yeah, I
specific
think so.
thing.
One of the code is written there to loading the scene.
Yeah, yeah. So I think this stuff we can talk about next time. One thing I wanted to show quickly here is I just copy pasted something and just searched for it as well. So you can see I just copy pasted this number, right? And what is this thing that we're looking at? I think it's still the scene. Yeah, it's a sample scene. So just to quick before we close off on this topic, um, so what exactly are we looking at? Can now somebody tell me? So I just searched for this number, and you can see there are multiple places that it is currently getting used. So what is this representing? The term that I've searched. Uh, Game object, player, player game object. Okay. How do we know this is the player game object? So Sachin was like generic game object, but Harish mentioned player game object. Any specific reason? Camera game object. Okay. Game object to which that component is attached. Okay. So you can see this kind of thing everywhere, right? This exclamation U, exclamation something, right? If I just search for this exclamation thing part itself, you might see it in a lot of places as well. So, okay, we see it here, see it here, see it here, a lot of places, right? So going back here where we were originally, just this. So what we're basically seeing is that there is a game object, right? And like I said, the whole concept of these IDs is not restricted to only game objects, right? Oh, sorry, not restricted to only files, right? We talked about that it's even used to identify each and everything inside Unity's ecosystem, right? So here we are seeing that this ID actually belongs to a game object, right? We don't know yet what game object, etc. this is, but as you come down and start reading more about these properties, you see the property called main camera. So now when you go and check in the inspector, your main camera game object, this is the ID, right? And then you can see that in other places where there is other components attached to the game object or some other game object, right? When you drag and drop one game object left and right to some other places, you have that same file ID getting used, right? So now you're seeing that in this case, it is on the same game object, but it can be on a different one as well. Your camera could be on different thing, or this might have been dragged and dropped into a player, etc. Right? So now you can see that this is getting used in multiple places, and it's the same idea of this game object. Okay, make sense? So can you look at this whole thing once again now and tell me something relevant here? Let me show you something here. Okay, so just look at all these three highlighted rows. What do they represent? So this we know it represents an ID, right? What is this first part? And even I don't know the answer. I'm just reading information and telling you what makes logical sense, right? So U stands for update components attached to that ID. Okay. Okay. It looks like components. Okay. But this is a game object. It's not a component. This is a component. This is a component, right? So what's the difference? This is a transform, which is a component, right? So there is a mix of information, right? This is a game object, right? What else? We have transforms, we have lights, we have game objects, right? Looks like components, but even that is basic stuff like name tag, etc. Yeah. So okay. So as you can see, there's like all kinds of shit here, right? Anything here, Manvi? What exactly this entire thing is sort of
Yeah,
signaling?
I just saw something. So inside the game object also there's components like M component, and all these are
Correct.
referencing the below file IDs.
Correct. So we'll just control F and find this, and we'll see where this is. But
Yeah.
before we jump into that, and this is interesting that you can see here as well, there is a list of components inside it, right? So, but what does this entire thing mean? What is this first part entirely referencing? First, I want to understand
Okay.
that. Meet anything clear here on this?
I think so. It's containing component only, and it like it is also giving the number 181 and 20.
So, what are these numbers? What do you think?
So maybe it is telling the com- um,
I think there might be codes 181 and 20 for different type of components inside the Unity editor or something.
Yeah, I think so too. So
can
basically,
you yeah
everywhere where it is a game object, it's always one,
one
right? So everywhere there is camera, it's always 20, right? So basically, it's kind of differentiating information, you know. So let's look at this, right? So it's easy to validate this information. Let's look at where all four is used. I can see it's two, right? So here it's transform. If I jump to the next version, it's going to be transform as well, right? Everywhere there is one, it's a game object, right? Game object is the most common shit inside Unity, right? So probably that's why it's ID is sort of one, right? It makes logical sense, right? Like there's no rocket science to this, right? Here it is one, like I mean, okay, Control F failed, yes, it found 104 because one it started with one, but you can see this is render settings, right? 29 is occlusion culling settings, right? And if you see here, there is something even fancier, right? Unity has identified, given this tag, and this is the tag. I don't know exactly what this is. We'll have to figure something out. but basically it's something, some version number, something internal to do with how it reads this information. But again, it's using this as a key identifier, right? And then turning these into specific things, right? So let's look at some more examples of one. Okay, 157, 196, one is game object. That's for sure, right? So you can see all these numbers are nothing but representing what follows. What is the type that follows? That's all, right? So it's not really rocket science. The other thing, so this was the other thing that you pointed out, right, Mas? So you can see that within a game object, it is referring to other file IDs, and these are all the components on it, right? So let's see, does this exist somewhere? It does. It has this transform here. And where was this created? So you can see this game object, right, has a transform component, and that transform component comes right under this. It's right here, right? And if I search for this one, it's going to be another one of the components under it. And I can see already it's the camera component, right? Without even control F, right? It's the camera component. And this one is going to be the audio listener, right? So you can see it's maintaining this internal data structure of all the components that actually are attached to this game object, right? And on the component itself, it is maintaining a reference of the game object that it belongs to. So there is linking both ways. A game object knows all the components that are attached to it, and an audio listener knows which game object does it belong to, right? So communication can happen both ways. Make sense? You can see here as well, right? So every game object has this list of components, right? So one of them is going to be light, and the other one is going to be something else, transform. There it is, transform and transform. Good. Any questions? All right, good, awesome. So, so I mean, like half of the stuff that I told you, I didn't know about myself. I was just reading through and just telling you. Trust me. Right? Like that's what part of the job is. That you have to research things, you have to learn things on the fly, you have to make logical sense of things as well, right? So, don't worry if a lot of stuff feels new. Uh, this is something that we'll start to pick things as you go along and as you start to build more experience here as well, right? Even as you saw, like when Manmeet and I are discussing, we're trying to make logical sense of what we see, right? Because shit keeps changing so fast in the industry, you're not going to be ever able to keep up, right? So you just need to start building this intuition. Oh, what is this exactly? What is this? You build that curiosity, naturally things will start coming to you as well. Cool, guys. Anything else to add, Manmeet, before we close up? Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think so. We are good.
All right, perfect. Any other questions, guys? Before we close today's call. Okay, so I think, yeah.
So one question is, so can we change the data?
Yeah. Don't
Like,
change the IDs, but change everything else you can.
can we change? Is it possible to change the data?
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely. It's just text data, right? You can change the text data no matter what. That's what we were talking about earlier as well, right? If you want to change the compression size, etc., right? You can directly change the data and save the file. And when you open up Unity, you'll see that reflected in the settings.
Okay. So, is it can hack? Anybody can hack that?
No,
Like, say, no.
no, because the thing is that you have to write editor scripts to do this, like the thing that we didn't talk about too much, but you can only make it run when you are in the development ecosystem. That means only your team has access to this kind of files, right? Actual people who are playing don't have access to these files, right? So that's where like hacking and all doesn't even come into play.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Makes sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Any other questions, guys? All right, cool, awesome. So I think let's close off for today. Let's try to make sure that we are keeping up with the pace. I can still see a lot of folks are kind of behind in terms of the first few modules. Next time we'll start diving into the animation, code reviews, etc. as well. So just make sure that you guys are up to speed in terms of just keeping up with the pace of the modules. Otherwise, at the end of the project, you'll start to feel there's too much shit and you can't get done. So let's try to keep up, attend the evening stand-ups, and continue doing the progress updates as well. Right?
Yeah, yeah. One thing I just wanted to add. Can we just unlock all the modules that we are supposed to complete by say Friday on Tuesday itself?
The problem is structurally it can overload you at times. That's why I don't want to do it in like chunks. Rather, I want to do it more sequential. But any specific reason why you're asking for that?
No, just say something comes up a day before and I'm behind. Otherwise, I get to plan like I'll do this on Wednesday, then on I'll do this on Thursday and this on Friday.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I can understand why, given your sort of because you're already working full time as well, right? So I can understand the context here. But from an average person's use case, it's more better to have like things sort of unlock at certain times to, not overload people as well. So, but let me think through on that. If there is something that we can do customized there as well, I'll let you know as well. Okay.
Okay, no problem.
Cool guys. So thanks Manmeet for joining. I'll touch base with you probably tomorrow sometime as well offline, and we can have a quick chat.
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
Cool. All right. Awesome guys. So let's close off, and I'll see you guys all on Discord as well. All right. Take care. Good night.
Yeah, bye bye everyone.